Hi everyone, my name's Margot Riley. The State Library acknowledges the Gadigal people, the traditional custodians of this land on which knowledge has been exchanged for millennia. We also celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal culture and language across New South Wales, and I pay my respects to elders both past and present of the Eora Nation and extend that respect to any other Indigenous people here today. Thank you for tuning into this exclusive talk for the Friends of the Library. Friends have access to a great range of events and member benefits and discounts at the library. If you would like to find out more, click on the Join button on the State Library website. If you have any questions, please enter them on the chat button on your screen and I'll try to answer them at the end of the session. So today we're going to go on a little journey with a little item that I discovered as part of my work here. I'm just going to take my tag off. I don't like seeing that around my neck. So that's gone now. Feel better. Okay, so this story takes us back to 2019. Yes, it seems like a long time ago now. And part of the work that curators here at the library do is we participate in a range of functions and activities that to provide lifelong learning experiences for members of the general public. And in 2019, we started a new program called Finding Out the History of Your House, because there are many people who are really interested to know about more about where they are living. And we also wanted to promote our subdivision plan collection because we'd done a massive digitisation project and we wanted to showcase different ways people could research their local areas and their houses by using the library's subdivision plan collections. So in my presentation, of course, you've got to start with your own house where you live. And so here's a picture of my house, and I live in Stanmore. And I was really excited to go onto the library's subdivision plan site and find this gorgeous plan of the subdivision for South Annandale, Stanmore and Petersham. It even has the most gorgeous little view of the Stanmore station, which pretty well much looks like that. And I know my producer who's here with me today, Emily, also lives in Stanmore. So she and I are both very excited to see this picture here. And then as you go from the train station, you go along here's the station here and you walk along, and my house is in Gordon Crescent. And when I zoomed in, I could actually see the footprint of where my house was built in 1890. So that was very, very exciting. So moving along, it was like, well, okay, I can't just talk about my house. I have to, how would you actually go about finding out about somebody else's house? So I did what we always do, which is a catalogue search, and I typed in house construction and up popped this fantastic little record. I thought, what on earth is this? And so went down with a colleague to Stack, and we found this gorgeous little object, this tiny little notebook. It's not, it's just the size of a small notebook that would fit into a breast pocket. But what was beautiful about this was it documented the entire process of a young couple in Sydney finding land and then working out what the type of house they were going to build on the site. Going into the little notebook, we found the name, Mrs. G.B. Moore, and we had the date, January 18, 1913. So again, through the pleasures and the joys of Trove, we were able to type in and we got the fact that Gertrude had married, Gertrude Barbara had married Carl Moore in 1906. So we started to get a little bit of a context of this young couple. They'd been married for a few years and then they go looking for some land. So in looking into the little notebook, it was fantastic in the level of detail that it gave us. It told us that the land was on the corner of Belmore Road and Stanley Streets. The names have changed a little bit over time. It was part of the Claremont estate, and it just really wonderful narrative. You know, we rushed off to Cogra and bought another Herald to see the seller's address and waited at his place a considerable time for him to appear. He asked £105 and we offered 97. After further talk about the price and the fence that cost him £40 without his labour. It's just lovely little detail. It's almost like you're there while they're going through all these negotiations. And then we were able to go to the subdivision plans, find the subdivision plan for the Claremont estate, and you can see the block of land that Gertrude and Carl purchased. The names, as I say, streets have actually changed names. So it actually was on the corner of Belmore Road and Hurstville Road. And then when we go to Street View, we were actually able to see that the house was still standing on the corner of today. But again, the names of the streets have changed. It's Australia Street now. So 18 Australia Street on the corner of King George's Road. So we really felt we'd sort of nailed this little story and located the little house. Going further in, we discovered that there were these beautiful little illustrations that really gave you a picture of the property and the kinds of thought processes that had gone on with the young couple, working out how much they could expand, you know, what kind of decisions they wanted to make. And it really gave you a sense of maybe how their relationship was, that they were very careful and very considered and very well and documenting their lives together. And as I say, it just went on and on through every page, every weekend, you know, maybe every consecutive day where they would go out, and all through January. You can imagine how hot it would be traveling out on the train. They documented the times of the trains, how much it cost to go on the train, how much the newspaper cost. There was just every single thing, every aspect, even down to the contents of the shed that they also bought from Mr. Conybeare. Every little part of the story was documented. They also went through the whole business of the transaction of paying for it, going to the conveyancer, in making, you know, doing an insurance payment, and then subsequent visits through March and through to the end of July, where they were regularly going and preparing the ground in order to have the property, the house construction begin. And this was one of our favourite little bits of the story, because it started to give you a sense of their day. So it says that they've taken photographs of the land, they've been removing stumps, they've marked out the house, the position of the house. They also go on to talk about going for a walk. They go for a walk through the wildflowers. They look at other houses in the area. Yes, there it is. Went for a walk in the afternoon, gathering wildflowers, including Boronia. Saw some fibro places during the walk. They looked very tin pot and cheap. They got up to the ironbark stump that grew near the big tree and cut it down. And then they start to plant a flower garden of their own. They're waiting for the water to be connected, and they take out their 2 deck chairs and put them together on the land. They take out their pannikins and teapots to make a cup of tea. And they'll go for another walk past the red brick tiled houses, which they obviously prefer to the tin pot weatherboard timber houses, and gathering wildflowers. So you really get a bit of a sense of the excitement that they have at buying the land. They boiled their own billy this time, gathering more wildflowers and taking more photographs of the land. This is some of that detail that they put in about how they were building and what they were building and what things cost and how many of the things that they needed. But at this stage, we weren't quite sure how they'd gotten to this point. And this is sort of where the time ran out, because of course we were just getting ready for an event. We were able to write up the story of you know, discovering the notebook on the library's website. And this is, of course, as you can see, is you know, March 2019. Also, in doing the research, I wanted to check out the donor how the little notebook had come into the library. And we were really lucky to have this letter that was on file, and it says, you can see quite clearly there, that it was found on the Mittagong rubbish tip, and that Mr. Sonta had gone there. He says, "I'm sorry about it being so dirty, but that's what happens to things in a rubbish tip." But it's interesting that he notes that he's very intrigued as to the numbering of the banknotes and how the money was withdrawn from the bank, and that some of the money was actually made in gold. And it is lovely. So this is 1984, and he is asking that we can find some use for the document. And this is what he's talking about. When the young couple bought the property, they actually shared the expense, which I think is really quite unusual for the time, 1913. Gertie drew from her book £40, being in £5 notes. And Carl's gone to the trouble of actually writing down the serial numbers of the Australian notes. And you sort of wonder about that, you know, is it just a sign of how careful he was? Is it a worry that perhaps if he gives this money over to Mr. Conybeare, they might be gazumped? And is there some way, perhaps by writing down the serial numbers, that they might avoid losing their money? So again, that very cautious kind of nature, but also that there is £5 in gold. So fascinating level of documentation that has gone into it all. And the fact that Gertie is the one that's got the receipt down the bottom here for the ladder and the wheelbarrow that they bought for £1 as well. So, you know, last year, of course, we had the pandemic, which seems to have gone, you know, in a blur. Our lives changed almost overnight. So a year on from discovering the notebook, you know, life changed very, very much. And then in the return to work at the end of 2020, the library launched into the production of a new magazine called Open Book. And we were also looking for different ways to engage with the general public, just so that they knew that we were back in business and that everything was as back to normal as possible here at the library. So one of the stories that was put into the media was the story of the Little House Notebook. Some of you may have seen this article, which went into the Daily Telegraph in December. And this was followed by, again, and part of the business of the library is to have we cross a range of media. So we, social media as well as print media. And so in January of this year, on the anniversary of the day that the land transaction happened, we posted on Twitter that this had happened on this day, that the young couple had bought their land. And then there's a range of social engagement that happens, and you can see down the bottom that this got a few retweets and a few likes. It was also posted onto Instagram, where it got, you know, a few more likes, and the message was pushed out a little bit further. And then it also went on to the Facebook page. And it was really through Facebook and Twitter that we managed to get some fantastic engagement with the broader community, because that is part of the way that we find out about our collections. We can't know everything. We don't have time to perhaps research everything as much as we would like. And the citizen researchers out there really add a huge amount to what the library does. So through the Facebook engagement, we got this great stream of people responding to this little item and really sort of wondering again who the people are. You know, same name as my grandparents. What a coincidence. I wonder if there are ancestors of mine on my mother's side. Gertrude Moore was my grandmother's name. So you just see the way people are interacting with this. And that's one thing that social media is perfect for. I like the one from Mrs. Annette Boss, where she says, I knew a Mr. Sonta that lived up the road from me in Mittagong. I wonder if it was him that found it. So one wonderful engagement, and it makes us know that the communities out there are really interested in this type of material. So it's a two-way exchange of information. But one of the best outcomes was from a colleague, Matthew Stevens, who works up at the Sydney Living Museums. Sydney Living Museum have the wonderful Caroline Simpson Research Library, and they specialise in architecture and interior decoration and things like that. So Matt was right onto it and straight away said, I think I know where the plans came from for this little house. So he posted the link to Cottage Homes, which again gave us a perfect platform. We jumped straight away onto their website, and we actually found, because this little one was published in January 1915, and it was the 8th edition, and Gertrude and Carl had bought their land in 1913. So we thought, okay, well, it can't be that edition. It would be an earlier edition of the catalogue that they might have seen. luckily the Sydney Living Museum had also digitised an earlier edition, and they had been published since 1900 with not that many changes in the contents. But it is a company known as George Hudson and Son. Now, they were operating at Blackwattle Bay in Glebe. This fantastic image here of the scale of their business. And they were timber yards and joinery mills. And part of what they did was they produced ready-made houses. They were like little kit homes. So the Weatherberg cottages were machine made. All the pieces were cut up. They were all numbered, so you could actually fit it together a bit like a huge Lego set, really. And it explains all of that very clearly in the front of the brochure. So it's new and modern designs, as well as improvements in some of the older plans, which are still greatly favoured. Sorry, I'm going to sneeze probably. They also would quote on the prices, and the prices covered certain things, but not brick or paint or any of the other sand, cement, chimney pots, things like that. So it was basically just the timber that was supplied. They quote erected and painted. So you can see from that introduction the level of information that, that we could glean from this document as well. And also the specification. So you sort of get a bit of a sense where some of the information that was being written into the little notebook had come from, because it seems that there's some similarities. If you did a crosswalk between the notebook and this document, you can see where Gertrude and Carl were actually getting a lot of their information from. And then looking inside, if we compare the notebook, there's this little note on the 6th of July, which says that they have, that they're waiting for the Hudson's building inspector, and he's going to give the estimate for the foundation of plan number 10. So now it all becomes clear. And looking in the little weatherboard cottage catalogue, we see the elevation of number 10. And when we compare that to Carl's drawing, you can see that it is very much the same house, even though it is flipped to a slightly different orientation. And in looking further into the Hudson notebook, you see the floor plan. And you can see how that relates to the little floor plan that is included in Carl's drawing here. Fascinating to see the quotations on the basic materials and how much it would cost to have it painted and erected. And you see that there is a difference in the prices that we're seeing in Carl's notebook, which is what is making us think that we know that they favoured a brick villa over a timber villa, but also perhaps that they went for a slightly more expensive model. And this is what Matthew had been suggesting in his comment on Facebook, that they had actually gone for model number 10B. And if you look at the floor plan, you can see that it is very similar. It looks like they've just copied it. All the measurements are exactly the same. So extraordinary through social media, just to be able to have all of that information and knowledge brought together. So a great example of two cultural institutions working together to solve a little mystery. And fascinating to get the detail of the costs, because as per plan finished, presumably including the brickwork and the plaster lining, it's £320, as opposed to if it was timber, it would have been £270. And then this is and then we've got that confirmation there that the Labor had done in the erection of plan number 10. So once again, we got that same kind of citation of plan number 10, which seems to agree with the idea that they had gone with number 10. Also with one of the examples of the specifications, and they've done this lovely little listing where it says specification of work required to be used in the erection and completion of a brick villa. And it talks in and describes the types of the bricks that they want to use. So they want bands of blueies and red next to the windows, framed in red. So again, we're getting a much more detailed picture of what the finished cottage might have been. Also in the notebook that comes from the catalogue from Hudson, you get images of what the houses look like constructed. So that again was able to, because we know that Carl and Gertrude were taking photographs on the land and presumably took photographs through the process of the erection, but we don't have those. So it is lovely to be able to think, you know, to have an example of what the house might have looked like when it was first built. And we have here, you can see examples of 10B and also erected in various locations. So Campsie, Maroubra and Penshurst. So it was obviously a popular design that people who were buying up land in these various subdivisions around Sydney, the types of houses that they were having built by Hudson's. And beyond the outside of the building, you think, well, what did it look like inside? And again, Hudson's were a fantastic source of information about joinery and what the house might have looked like inside. It also is illustrated. So once again, we get to see some of the finishes. Maybe these were some of the door furniture or the, you know, the spindles for the verandas or the mantle, whatever detail the young couple might have been looking for the interior of their house. And then taking it one step further, furnishings. What type of furnishings might we have seen inside the house? Now, this is where I start to get a little bit fanciful because I really have no idea how Gertrude and Carl might have chosen to decorate their home. But this is another brochure from Hudson's, and it is for the decor of the houses, and it dates to around 1920, so it's a little bit later than this period. But you can imagine that a young couple would have taken some time to actually acquire the furnishings for their home. And of course, between 1913 and 1920, we do have the intervention of the First World War. Now, we don't really know that much about Carl and Gertrude, and we don't know whether Carl actually went to war. I did investigate the records, but I couldn't see any mention of him going to war. That's not to say that he didn't. But sometime, you know, until the 1920s, it's possible that this is the kind of fit out they might have gone to for their little cottage in Hurstville. So getting back to the comments that we were receiving from our Facebook post, it was great to have content from Matt Devine. Now, Matt had worked with the library on the exhibition that we had done with the Government Architect's Office. So again, we're tapping directly into some really specialised experts out there. So through our Nita Stacks, he's trying to take this inquiry further. He has done the same as we have done, is finding the street view look. And then there is this sort of string of conversation about, you know, is this the same house? And yes, you know, it is the same house, and Matt has said down there, he can see that it's an early 20th century house hidden in the property with a gable and a veranda to the street facade and another gable at the start of the main roof, all clad in brick veneer. And of course, we now know that the couple did use brick veneer at the time. I like this one from Kate, who's saying she's going to ask her mum if she remembers the house because her mum grew up in Hurstville Road, about 10 houses away. She's 93 now, but you never know, she might have something to offer. So it's just great to have that engagement with people. And here we go. This is the actual view of the house that exists today. And you can see that much of the frame is the same. What's happened is that they have clad the front of the house and built in the veranda. They've closed in the veranda and put in a garage, which of course would have been absolutely typical of most houses in the 1920s to 30s when people started to own their own car. What's fun about this, well, fun but quirky, is that people know this house because it's actually covered, and I don't know whether you can see, masses of security cameras. They're all over the house. And in the Daily Telegraph had actually done a news story about the house back in 2014 because it is known as probably the house with the most security cameras in Sydney. And the couple who owned the house at the time said that they'd been there for 30 years. So again, we got that little bit of extra information. They've been living in the house for 30 years. So back to the 1980s, possibly around the time that the previous occupants had left the property, which may have been the precursor for why the item ended up on the tip at Mittagong. As for the reason for the security cameras, well, I guess it made the current owners feel more secure in their home. Now, another benefit that we had from Twitter was that, again, our citizen historians, this one is a gentleman by the name of Mr. Phil Withenef, who is a creator of Sydney Then and Now. He, I love the little story. It says, husband of one, father of two, city fringe dweller and local history fanatic. So he had taken investigation of Carl and Gertrude one step further, looking at the subdivision of Bexley and going into the directories, the residential directories. And he was able to give us Carl's profession as an artist, which of course explains why there's those lovely little illustrations in the book. It really gives us, justification for the artistry of the object. It is interesting that it gives their address as Carlton Parade in Carlton, and whether this is actually from the 1930s. So whether or not during the Depression, for some reason, perhaps the family rented out their home and maybe moved to smaller premises and maybe lived in an apartment or something over in Carlton Parade. Again, these are just questions, one can't answer them, but And I just wanted to focus on the artistry because it is the shading, the colour, the rendering, which is all done in beautiful watercolour, really does speak to somebody who has artistic skill. And I like the fact that you can see the reference now that we know that they took the lead from the Hudson and Sons catalogues. You can see where the embellishment of the title panes comes from as well. It's all within keeping and fitting in with a personalised version of that little catalogue of building their house. So wrapping up the library's involvement with this little item, we followed up with some of the news, some of the information that we had gleaned from doing the social media. And this was also followed up by Channel 9 News. They picked up the story and put it out on their e-news. So from one tiny little tweet or post, it's extraordinary the reach that one story can have. And then I couldn't sort of let things go because people were asking us. They were saying, well, where's the donor? Who's Mr. Sonta? And so finally, after a lot of surfing around, I managed to find, very sadly, an obituary for Mr. Sonta. And he'd passed away on the 24th of September last year. So close in time, within a couple of months of us actually re-emerging and re-looking into this object. Unfortunately, he had passed away. So we don't any longer have an opportunity to ask him personally why it was that this item so engaged his interest. But in looking further on the internet, this is his little house. And you do see that it has a similarity to the house that the young couple, Carl and Gertrude, built on their property. So you do wonder, maybe there was this, a feeling of empathy. It attracted him. Mr. Sonta was attracted to the story of the young couple who built a house very similar to the house that he himself lived in. And then in the sale notice for this property from 2017, it mentioned that Mr. Sonta was a senior accountant at the Australian Taxation Department for 40 years. So again, maybe that's why he was so attracted to that idea of the personal accounting, that level of information and detail that Carl had gone to in documenting the money and how the property had been paid for. So again, we have no exact answers for any of this, but it is extraordinary to be able to have even just taken, a step back in time and engaged with so many people about one item in the library's collection of so many thousands and millions of things. Okay, so I did the wrong thing. Stop sharing. Okay, So I'm back on screen. Okay. Now what I wanted to do, since we have you all here, is I can actually show you what I found down in the collection. So this is the little item. You can see it's just a very small linen envelope. And opening up inside with a little package just wrapped up in tissue paper. And when we opened it up, here it is. So it has no cover, and you can see how vulnerable it is. It's amazing that it actually survived in the tip. And again, if only we knew how it came there. And then I'll just show you that lovely elevation of the house, because it is just such, you know, without that kind of, you know, detail, it would have been almost impossible to tell this story. So there it is there. So just big enough, you can see, to slip inside a breast pocket and make notes and then take it home. Perhaps he did take his watercolours with him and sit on the deck chair with Gertrude while they were sipping their cup of tea to make some of those drawings. So I'm not sure whether we have any questions. Do we have any questions?
You've answered quite a few.
Oh, I'm too good. I just answered all the questions already. It's been really lovely to share this story with you, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Please attend other Friends events as they're advertised, and we look forward to seeing you back at the library when we can. Thank you.